If you think drones only capture scenery, wait until you see what this one found. Subscribe before the truth gets deleted. It began on a gray October morning, when the fog hung low over the pine-covered ridges of Coldwater County, Montana. Locals were used to hunters disappearing for a few hours, sometimes even a full day, but no one had ever vanished like Ethan Reeves. Ethan was 43, a seasoned outdoorsman, the kind of man who could track elk by scent and navigate by the stars. He wasn't reckless. He'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan before settling into quiet mountain life. On the morning of October 14th, he set out from his cabin before dawn with his dog, Scout, and his rifle slung over his shoulder. By sunset, only the dog came back. Scout was soaked, trembling, and covered in mud, one paw bleeding. His GPS collar was broken. Ethan's wife, Mara Reeves, waited until midnight before calling the sheriff's office. Sheriff Dale Rourke had worked Coldwater for 20 years. He'd seen avalanches, missing hikers, and more bear attacks than he cared to count. But something about this call felt different. The dread in Mara's voice, the sound of Scout whining in the background. By 2 a.m., deputies were combing through the logging trails with searchlights. The first search turned up nothing. No tracks, no rifle, no footprints. Just one strange detail. Ethan's pickup was parked at the edge of a Forest Service road. The driver's door locked, keys still inside. To the sheriff, that made no sense. Ethan never locked his truck, not when hunting. He must have gone off trail, Rourke muttered. But the woods stretched for miles, dense, uneven, and dangerous in bad weather. After 48 hours, the official search stalled. Local volunteers, hunters, and family friends joined in. They covered ground on ATVs, horses, and foot patrol. Still nothing. Then came the drone footage. A week after Ethan vanished, a college student named Travis Colburn uploaded a video to his YouTube channel titled Drone Scouting Gone Wrong, Coldwater Ridge. He'd been testing a new thermal drone for his environmental project, scanning sections of the forest for wildlife data. The video began like any other, sweeping shots of pine forests, mist drifting through the treetops. But near the end, around the 8-minute mark, a faint shape appeared in the feed. Something pale, lying near the creek bed. At first glance, it looked like driftwood, but when Travis enhanced the image, it wasn't. It was a human figure. Authorities moved fast. The next morning, the sheriff's department, search dogs, and drones were back on site. The coordinates led them to a steep drop-off near Cedar Creek, a narrow ravine hidden behind dense brush. When they reached the spot, they found a torn piece of camouflage fabric snagged on a branch, the same pattern Ethan had been wearing. But there was no body. The creek had washed out part of the embankment. Hendricks, the lead deputy, noticed deep boot prints leading away from the creek, uneven, staggered, as if the man had been injured. They followed them uphill until the prints disappeared into the moss. Then, something odd. About 50 feet farther up the slope, they found a spent shell casing lying in the mud. It was a .308 Winchester, the same caliber Ethan used. But no rifle, no blood, no sign of struggle. By evening, rumors spread through the town faster than the fog. Some said Ethan had shot at something, or someone. Others claimed he'd been ambushed by poachers. One neighbor swore she heard a single gunshot echo that night, somewhere past the ridge. Mara Reeves sat in her living room, wrapped in Ethan's old hunting jacket, watching news crews swarm the property. His husband's face flashed on every local station, but it wasn't the kind of attention anyone wanted. Then she got the call that would change everything. A state trooper from Helena contacted her, saying someone had used Ethan's hunting license ID number to purchase gas and a pack of cigarettes at a station 60 miles south, 3 days after he went missing. The timestamp didn't lie. The ID was scanned, and the signature matched his. But the station's surveillance footage didn't. The footage showed a man wearing a dark hood, his face obscured. He was driving Ethan's truck. Sheriff Rourke drove straight to the gas station, collected the footage, and studied every frame. The timestamp was crystal clear, October 17th, 9:42 p.m. The man's build was similar to Ethan's, but his walk was different, faster, tense, almost deliberate. He paused the footage. On the counter, beside the cash register, was the pack of cigarettes. The clerk had described the buyer as quiet, polite, but strange, like he was hiding something. When he zoomed in, he saw it. A tattoo on his wrist. A compass rose, partly faded. He froze. He knew that tattoo. It belonged to Ethan's brother, Caleb Reeves. Caleb and Ethan had a complicated history. Caleb had been in and out of trouble since his teens, mostly petty theft, one assault charge, and a long feud with Ethan over a family inheritance. They hadn't spoken in 3 years. When deputies questioned him, Caleb didn't flinch. He claimed he'd borrowed Ethan's truck the day before the disappearance to help with firewood work and returned it to the same spot. "I didn't even know he was missing," he said. But his story cracked under scrutiny. The gas station footage proved he lied about returning the truck early. He insisted he'd driven there because the gas gauge was low, but when pressed, he couldn't explain why he was using Ethan's license card or where he'd gotten it. Caleb's eyes stayed cold. "You think I'd hurt my own brother? You're looking in the wrong damn place." 3 days later, the drone footage resurfaced, this time re-uploaded by an anonymous account under the title Coldwater Creek, What They Didn't Show You. It was the same footage, except longer, uncut. In the last 30 seconds, the drone tilts downward, following a heat signature moving through the woods. It's faint, but visible. A figure limping heavily, carrying something metallic that catches the light. Then, from somewhere beyond the tree line, another heat source appears, closing in fast. The footage cuts to static. Authorities traced the IP upload to an internet cafe 2 towns over. The computer had been wiped. But inside the trash bin near the terminal, investigators found a discarded USB drive. It was broken, water damaged, yet one file was recoverable. A video fragment only 3 seconds long. It showed the same creek, same fog, and a man's voice whispering, he wasn't alone out here. For a week, Coldwater buzzed with rumors. Some said the sheriff's office had found hidden footage, others claimed federal agents had taken over. But in truth, the case had grown too big for the county to handle. By late October, the Montana Bureau of Investigation sent in Detective Sarah Lowell, a specialist in digital forensics. She'd solved missing persons cases before, but none involving hacked drone footage and family betrayal. Lowell arrived at the sheriff's office on a frostbitten morning, her breath misting in the air. The first thing she noticed was the chaos. Boxes of printouts, maps, aerial scans tacked to the wall, and a hollow-eyed Sheriff Rourke nursing coffee that had gone cold hours ago. He slid her the recovered USB report. "Whatever's on that footage, someone didn't want us to see it," he said. Lowell leaned closer. "And you think it's connected to the brother?" Rourke hesitated. "I don't know, but that voice at the end, he wasn't alone out here. Whoever said that wasn't Ethan. And if it wasn't Caleb," he trailed off. "Then there's someone else." 2 days later, the search warrant for Caleb Reeves' cabin came through. The small structure sat miles beyond Coldwater town, tucked behind black pine trees and accessible only by dirt track. When officers approached, Caleb was chopping wood in the yard. He didn't resist, just gave a long, irritated sigh and said, "You're wasting your time." Inside the cabin, the air smelled like diesel and pine cleaner. Lowell swept the kitchen while Rourke checked the bedroom. Nothing illegal, but the walls told a story. Hunting trophies, military plaques, and a photo of Ethan and Caleb as teenagers holding a fishing line, smiling like brothers who never imagined they'd turn into suspects. Then, on a shelf near the bed, Lowell found a drone controller. It was the same model Travis Colburn had used, the same range, same frequency band. She asked, "Mind explaining this?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "It's junk. I found it down near Cedar Creek last week." Lowell opened the battery hatch. Inside was a memory card. She slipped it into her tablet. The screen flickered, then loaded several thumbnails, each labeled with a date and timestamp. Most were blank or corrupted, but one was intact. 10:14creekrun.mov. The timestamp matched the day Ethan disappeared. The video. They watched in silence. At first, just forest. The slow drift of trees under the drone's eye, the murmur of water below. Then movement. Ethan, walking with his rifle, pausing every few seconds as if searching for something unseen. He looked nervous, not lost, but waiting. He turned once toward the camera, unaware he was being filmed. Then, a voice off-screen said quietly, "Don't move, brother." Ethan froze. The feed jolted as the drone zoomed in, capturing the moment he turned toward the trees. A shadow moved behind him, then the sound of a gunshot. The drone shook, lost focus, and spiraled briefly before cutting out. Lowell stared at the screen. She said, "That's not a hunting accident." Rourke's hands clenched into fists. "That's an execution." Family secrets. Caleb swore he didn't record it, claimed someone must have planted the drone near his property, but when the memory card was examined, the GPS log told a different story. The drone had taken off from a field less than 400 yards from his cabin. Lowell pressed him again. "Why film your brother?" Caleb finally cracked. "You don't understand. I didn't kill him. I was meeting him. He asked me to bring the drone." "Why?" Rourke asked. Caleb swallowed hard. He said he found something out there. Said he needed proof. Something buried in the woods. "Proof of what?" Caleb's voice dropped to a whisper. "He didn't tell me, but he said if anything happened to him, to stay away from the quarry." The investigation took a darker turn when they reopened Ethan's old service records. Turns out, 5 years earlier, Ethan had been part of a private security contract, a job that ended badly. A missing weapons shipment, a cover-up, and one name that appeared again and again in the files, Captain Warren Dwire, now a local businessman and hunting club chairman. Rourke knew Dwire. Everyone did. He'd retired from the force years ago with medals and money, but Ethan had worked security for him briefly before abruptly quitting and cutting off contact. Lowell leaned back in her chair. "You think Dwire is involved?" Rourke didn't answer. Instead, he looked at a photo pinned to the board, Ethan's rifle, still missing. If Dwire wanted something buried, maybe Ethan found it. The quarry discovery. Using the drone coordinates and terrain data, search teams revisited Miller's Quarry, a decommissioned excavation site 2 miles from where Ethan's truck was found. For 2 days, they dug through mud and debris. Nothing. Then, just before sunset on the 3rd day, one of the cadaver dogs barked sharply. Beneath a layer of fallen logs, they found a military-style duffel bag sealed with duct tape. Inside, old surveillance photos, receipts, and a flash drive. The drive contained scanned ledgers, payments to Dwire's company from a weapons contractor tied to missing inventory from years ago. The file appeared twice, once signed by Dwire and once by Ethan Reeves. Lowell whispered, "He must have been blackmailing him." Rourke shook his head, "Or trying to expose him." The breaking point. The evidence was enough for a warrant. That night, they searched Dwire's hunting lodge, a sprawling property overlooking the valley. He cooperated calmly, pouring coffee for the detectives as they scoured his office. Every inch of the man screamed control. Crisp shirt, calm voice, polite deflections. When Lowell mentioned the ledgers, his smile barely twitched. He said, "Those files are old contracts. Ethan worked for me. He knew what he was signing." "But he didn't know what you were shipping," Rourke said quietly. "And you have proof of that?" Lowell handed him a photo from the duffel bag, a time-stamped image of crates being moved from the quarry. Dwire glanced at it once before setting it down. He said, "This is Coldwater County, Detective. People come here to disappear. Sometimes they just stay gone." Rourke's jaw tightened. "Except your problem is, one of them didn't." The twist in the sky. That night, back at the sheriff's station, Lowell replayed the recovered drone video for the 100th time. But this time, she paused right before the gunshot.
In the upper corner of the frame, faint and easy to miss, was a reflection. Sunlight glinting off a second drone, hovering higher, partially obscured by mist. Someone else had been filming. She magnified the reflection, the shape, the silhouette. It was smaller, older, and partially damaged, but stamped faintly along the side was a marking that chilled her. Property of Coldwater Sheriff's Department. Rourke stared at the image, disbelief tightening his throat. That's one of ours. Lowell turned slowly toward him, meaning someone inside your department knew what was happening before it did. The next morning, Rourke found a plain envelope on his desk, no return address. Inside was a single printed photo, a still frame from the drone footage, Ethan's final moment before the shot. Across the bottom, scrawled in pen, were 4 words, "Check your own woods."
Sheriff Dale Rourke stared at the photo on his desk until the edges began to blur. The scrawled message, "Check your own woods," felt less like a taunt and more like a warning. He'd spent 20 years protecting Coldwater County, but for the first time, he wondered who he was really protecting. Outside, dawn crept across the valley, brushing pale light over frost-covered pines. The quarry, the creek, the fog, it all felt different now, as if the land itself had been keeping its own evidence locked away. Detective Sarah Lowell entered quietly, holding a thin file. "I ran the serial number from the drone reflection," she said. "It's registered to your department, signed out on October 12th. Rourke's head lifted. By who? Lowell slid the paper across the desk. He didn't need to read it. He recognized the signature immediately. His deputy, Tom Hendricks. Tom had been with him for 6 years, quiet, reliable, the kind of man who showed up early and stayed late. He was also the one who'd first volunteered to lead the ground search near Cedar Creek, the same search that had somehow missed Ethan's tracks. Rourke rubbed his temples. "You're saying my deputy filmed the murder?" Lowell shook her head. "I'm saying he was there, and maybe he filmed more than one thing." The confrontation. They found Hendricks later that morning, checking patrol cars in the garage bay. He looked up as they approached, calm, unreadable. "Tom," Rourke began, "we need to talk about the department drone." Hendricks didn't deny it. He just exhaled slowly, set his clipboard down, and said, "I figured you'd get there eventually." "Why?" Rourke demanded. "Why were you filming out there?" Hendricks met his eyes. "Because Ethan asked me to." Lowell blinked. "He reached out to you?" 2 days before he disappeared, said he had evidence, names, locations, documents. He didn't trust anyone else. He told me he was meeting someone at the quarry and needed a drone in the air for safety. "Did you see who he met?" Rourke asked. Hendricks hesitated. "Yeah, I saw Caleb." Lowell and Rourke exchanged a glance. Hendricks continued. "The day Ethan went missing, I was positioned half a mile away with a drone feed on my laptop. The footage I uploaded to the system, the part you saw, wasn't the full file. I cut the end." "Why?" Rourke's voice hardened. "Because it showed something else." Hendricks opened his locker and pulled out a small hard drive wrapped in a plastic evidence bag. He placed it on the table. When they played it, silence filled the room. The footage was identical up to the gunshot, Ethan turning, the echo cracking through the trees, but as the drone stabilized, the camera caught movement in the brush. A second man stepped out, wearing a tactical jacket, not Caleb. The camera autofocused just long enough to capture his face. Captain Warren Dwire. He walked calmly toward Ethan's body, holstered his weapon, and waved someone forward. Hendricks himself, visible in the corner of the frame, frozen, holding the drone controller. "God help me," Hendricks whispered. "He told me Ethan was armed and dangerous, said he was wanted for theft, that we were helping contain him. I believed him." Lowell stared at the screen. "So Dwire used you to cover his kill?" Hendricks nodded weakly. "Yes, and when I realized what really happened, it was too late. He threatened to destroy me, said if I ever spoke, I'd end up like Ethan." The evidence was undeniable. The footage was authenticated within hours, and a warrant went out for Dwire's arrest. But when officers reached his lodge, he was gone. His truck was still in the driveway, the back door was open, and on the dining table sat a single envelope labeled, "For the Sheriff." Inside was a handwritten letter. It read, "We all have to live with what we've buried. Ethan tried to dig it up. Now you will too. D.W." Behind the note was a small memory card. When they played it, it wasn't Dwire on screen. It was Ethan Reeves, sitting in a dark room, recorded days before he vanished. Ethan's final message. "If you're watching this, I probably didn't make it out," Ethan began. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed exhaustion. "I found the files Dwire hid, the contracts, the payments, the records tying him to the arms deal. I thought I could expose him quietly, but I was wrong. Someone from inside the department is helping to cover it up. If he gets to me, find the drone footage. That's the only thing that'll tell the truth." He paused, glancing off camera. "Tell Mara I'm sorry I didn't come home." The video ended. Lowell closed her laptop slowly. He knew he was walking into a trap. Rourke stared at the floor, and he walked in anyway. The final pursuit. That night, a trooper spotted Dwire's car abandoned near the Coldwater Bridge, a narrow overpass leading into the woods where it all began. Rourke and Lowell arrived minutes later, flashlights slicing through mist and pine needles. The forest was silent, except for the river below. Then, a faint glimmer ahead. A drone light, blinking weakly between the branches. They followed it to a clearing. The ground was uneven, muddy. In the center, a single, fresh grave, hastily covered with rocks. Beside it lay Dwire's badge and a service pistol half buried in the dirt. Lowell crouched, brushing mud from the weapon. Suicide? Rourke shook his head. No shell, no blood. He's still out here. But the sound that came next, the faint mechanical whir of propellers, made them both freeze. Above the trees, a drone hovered, camera pointed directly at them. Its red light blinked twice, then once, like a signal. Lowell looked up. "That's not ours." The drone tilted, scanning the ground before drifting back into the fog. By the time they followed, it was gone. The haunting truth. Weeks later, the official report listed Warren Dwire as missing, presumed dead. Deputy Hendricks resigned and entered witness protection. Mara Reeves sold the cabin and left Coldwater behind. But Detective Lowell stayed to close out the evidence logs. One evening, as she archived the final files, a notification pinged on her screen. New drone footage uploaded to the case drive. She opened it cautiously. The video showed the quarry at dawn, empty and still. Then, as the camera descended toward the creek bed, a figure appeared, a man walking with a limp, carrying something heavy in one hand. It wasn't Dwire. It wasn't Caleb. It was Ethan Reeves. His clothes were tattered, his face pale, but his eyes alive. He looked directly at the camera and whispered something inaudible before the screen cut to static. The upload time, 4:17 a.m., the same hour the sheriff's office security system logged an unknown device connection from inside the evidence room. Lowell replayed the footage in silence. Then she noticed something at the end, barely visible. A reflection in the drone's lens, a red light blinking among the trees, watching. The woods eventually swallowed the quarry, the creek, the scars of what happened. But sometimes locals say they see faint lights drifting through the pines, not stars, not flashlights. And when the wind is right, they swear they can hear it, the faint hum of a drone circling over the same ridge where Ethan Reeves vanished. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's just the past replaying itself. Or maybe, as Sheriff Rourke once said before he retired, some truths don't stay buried. They just keep recording. If you think this story was haunting, you're not ready for the next one. Subscribe before the next cold case goes live.